Jake, a truck driver, pulled into the Dusty Trails Motel at 3 a.m., exhausted from a cross-country haul. The desert highway was empty, and the motel's neon sign buzzed faintly, casting an eerie glow. He needed rest, but the place felt wrong. Too quiet, too isolated. The parking lot was empty except for his truck, and the windows of the motel were dark, some boarded up. The air was heavy, smelling of dust and something sour. Jake grabbed his bag, ignoring the unease creeping up his spine, and approached the office. The bell on the door jingled, but no one answered. A guest book lay open, filled with names in faded ink, some dated decades ago. A cold draft brushed his neck, and he swore he heard footsteps behind him, but the lot was empty. He shook it off, blaming the long drive, but the motel's silence felt like a held breath, waiting to exhale something terrible. He took a key for room 13, the only one available, and headed to his room, unaware of the eyes watching from the shadows. Room 13 smelled of mildew and old smoke, its wallpaper peeling in strips. Jake dropped his bag, noticing scratches on the doorframe, deep and jagged, like claw marks. The bed was unmade, sheets stained, and the mirror above the dresser was cracked, distorting his reflection. He tried the TV, but it showed only static, with faint voices murmuring beneath the noise. The air grew colder, and the light flickered, casting shadows that seemed to move independently. Jake sat on the bed, feeling watched, and noticed a photograph under the pillow. A faded image of a family, their eyes scratched out. His heart raced as he heard a knock on the door, slow and deliberate. He called out, but no one answered, only more knocks, now from the walls, then the ceiling. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, and he swore the mirror showed a figure behind him, though he was alone. He grabbed his keys, ready to leave, but the door wouldn't budge, the handle icy to the touch. Jake forced the door open and stumbled to the office, demanding answers. A clerk appeared, an old man with sunken eyes and a crooked smile, who hadn't been there before. He said room 13 was special, his voice raspy, almost inhuman. Jake demanded a refund, but the clerk laughed, his breath cold and foul. The guest book was now blank, the names gone, and Jake's signature appeared in red ink he hadn't used. The clerk whispered, "They like you," and pointed to the hallway, where shadows moved, forming vague human shapes. Jake backed away, hearing laughter from the rooms around him, though the motel was empty. The clerk's eyes glowed faintly, and his hand reached out, fingers unnaturally long. Jake ran to his truck, but the keys were gone, replaced by a small, cold object in his pocket, a rusted room key, not his own. The motel's neon sign flickered faster, spelling "no vacancy, now," and the desert seemed to close in, the fog thickening. Jake fled down the motel's corridor, the walls lined with locked doors that rattled as he passed. Whispers came from behind them, calling his name, begging him to enter. The air was heavy, smelling of decay, and the lights flickered, casting distorted shadows. He saw a child's handprint on one door, fresh and wet, though no one was there. The corridor seemed to stretch, doors multiplying, and he heard footsteps following, slow and deliberate. He turned, but the hallway was empty, except for a faint figure at the far end, a woman in a torn dress, her face obscured. She moved closer without walking, her form flickering like a bad signal. Jake's heart pounded as he reached the exit, but it led back to the corridor's start, trapping him in a loop. The whispers grew into screams, and the woman's voice hissed, "Stay forever." The walls pulsed, and he felt hands brushing his back, cold and insistent, pulling him toward the doors. Jake kicked open a door, hoping to find an exit, and found himself back in room 13. The room was different now, bloodstains on the walls, furniture overturned, and the mirror showing a family standing behind him, their faces eyeless. The photograph he'd found was pinned to the wall, now showing him among the family, his eyes scratched out. A voice whispered, "You're one of us," and the door slammed shut. Jake's flashlight revealed writing on the walls, names, dates, pleas for help, all in different hands. The air grew thick, and he felt a presence pressing against him, trying to enter his mind. He remembered a news story about a motel where a family vanished, their bodies never found. The whispers told him they were still here, trapped in the walls, and he was next. He smashed the mirror, and the room shook, the voices screaming in rage. Shards flew, cutting his arms, but he felt the presence weaken, giving him a chance to run. Back in the corridor, the ghostly woman appeared, her face now visible, half melted, her eyes black voids. She spoke of a family murdered in the motel decades ago, their spirits bound by a curse to trap others. She said Jake was chosen, his arrival no accident. The air grew colder, and the corridor filled with the family's ghosts, their forms flickering, hands reaching for him. The woman's touch burned his skin, and he felt his strength fading, as if the motel was draining him. The walls bled, red seeping through cracks, and the neon sign outside pulsed like a heartbeat. Jake's mind flashed with images of the family's death, knives, screams, blood pooling on the floor. He stumbled, his vision blurring, and saw his own face among them, as if he was already part of their curse. He fought to stay conscious, clutching the rusted key, which burned his hand. The woman whispered, "Sleep here," and the doors opened, revealing darkness that called to him. Jake reached his truck, but the engine wouldn't start, the dashboard dark. The rusted key was in the ignition, not his own, and the cabin filled with the smell of blood. The woman's face appeared in the windshield, her mouth stretching impossibly wide. The truck's radio blared, broadcasting the family's screams, and the seats grew sticky with blood. Jake's hands shook as he tried to escape, but the doors locked, trapping him inside. The motel's lights flickered in sync with the woman's laughter, and shadows climbed the truck, their fingers scratching the windows. He saw the family in the rearview mirror, sitting in the truck bed, their eyeless faces staring. The engine roared to life, moving the truck toward the motel without his input. Jake fought the wheel, but it turned on its own, aiming for room 13's door. The air grew thick, and he felt the curse pulling at his soul, urging him to join the family. He screamed, kicking the dashboard, desperate to break free. The truck stopped in front of room 13, the door now open, revealing a black void. The woman appeared, her form towering, and said the curse needed a new soul to continue. Jake's body felt heavy, his limbs moving toward the room against his will. The family's ghosts chanted, their voices vibrating through his bones, and the motel seemed to breathe, its walls pulsing. He saw visions of others trapped here, their faces frozen in terror, absorbed into the motel's walls. The rusted key glowed in his hand, burning hotter, and he realized it was the curse's anchor. He threw it into the void, and the woman screamed, her form fracturing. The motel shook, lights exploding, and the ghosts lunged, their hands clawing at him. Jake ran for the highway, the fog parting slightly, but the motel's pull was strong, like a tide dragging him back. He felt his memories fading, replaced by the family's pain, their endless hunger. Jake stumbled onto the highway, the motel's lights fading behind him. The ghosts pursued, their forms stretching, merging into a writhing mass. He found a flashlight in his pocket and swung it, the beam burning the ghosts like fire. The woman's screams echoed, but the light weakened her, her face dissolving. Jake ran, his legs burning, the fog thinning as he moved. The motel's neon sign flickered out, and the chanting stopped, replaced by silence. He saw headlights in the distance, a passing car, and waved frantically, screaming for help. The car slowed, but the driver's face paled, as if seeing something behind Jake. He turned, and the woman was there, inches away, her hands reaching for his heart. Jake swung the flashlight again, and she shattered, the ghosts collapsing into mist. The car sped off, leaving him alone, but the motel's pull was gone. He kept running, the highway stretching endlessly, his breath ragged. Dawn broke, casting light over the desert, and Jake collapsed beside the highway, exhausted but alive. The motel was gone, replaced by barren sand, as if it had never existed. A passing trucker stopped, offering a ride, and Jake climbed in, trembling. The trucker asked where he'd come from, and Jake muttered about the Dusty Trails Motel. The man frowned, saying it burned down in the 70s after a family's murder, never rebuilt. Jake's blood ran cold. He hadn't mentioned the family. He checked his pocket, finding the rusted key, now cold and dull. He threw it into the desert, refusing to look back. The trucker dropped him at a town, and Jake never drove that route again. But at night he hears the neon signs buzz, sees the family's eyeless faces in his dreams, and feels the motel's pull, waiting for him to return.